Hi, I'm Bruce Williams. I'm the CEO of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to Chamber Chats. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I live and work in the ancestral territories and lands of the Lekwungen-speaking Coast Salish nations, the Songhees and the Esquimalt. This program is brought to you by Island Savings, a division of First West Credit Union, and by C-SPAN Victoria Shipyards. We have been telling the story in terms of us all taxiing together down the recovery runway. Because, of course, when you're on a runway, eventually you lift off, which is what's going to happen as we get through this pandemic. And people leading the way with innovation and business leadership are the pivot pilots, making those pivots happen as we taxi down the runway. The construction sector in British Columbia accounts for 205,000 jobs. Add to that real estate and property development, that's another 121,000 jobs. And as the old saying goes, when there's cranes in the air, the economy is booming. Well, we have cranes in the air. The economy may not be booming, but this is a very important sector that's kind of in the middle of some changes and adjustments right now. We have some people in to talk with us about that today. John Knappett is the president of Knappett Projects. He is the Knappett in Knappett Projects, whose signs are all over Vancouver Island for the work that they do with residential, industrial, commercial, and other infrastructure projects. Also, John is a chamber champion, by the way, with the Victoria Chamber. Tom Plumb is with us, also a chamber champion, CEO of Kinetic Construction, a construction and project management firm based around Vancouver Island, too. And also joining us today is Kathy Whitcher. Kathy is the executive director of an organization called the Urban Development Institute for the Capital Region. And Kathy, I think it's pretty clear to people what John and Tom do. Tell me about UDI. Who are you guys?
Of course, yeah. So UDI basically is I represent the development industry. So I work, my members, I'm a nonprofit. My members are anybody really that touches the development industry. Both Tom and John are members of mine. So yeah, developers, engineers, architects, everybody that touches the industry. And I give a voice to those people, to municipalities, provincial and federal government, all levels of government, when they're writing policies and bylaws and so on.
Yeah, decision-making things. Okay.
Absolutely.
So John and Tom, things were humming right along before COVID. Tom, Kinetic was very busy before all this happened and before the economy started to stumble. Tell me about Kinetic and what you were like before COVID started.
We weren't quite as busy before COVID.
Oh, you were busier after, right? In 2020.
Oh yeah, no, we've had 2020 was our best year.
And that's because of projects, I guess, that were in place before the pandemic began, right?
Yeah, I don't think there's a connection at all, but it just happens. The timing was there. And I guess the fortunate part is COVID didn't take out the rug from underneath us. So
right.
We were able to react to it and put in place good measures. And it looks like it's worked out. We got for the number of people in the clinic that in the industry, mm-hmm. We had an extremely low contact rate. So it was, for whatever reason, it was good.
Yeah, we'll talk about that a little more later on, though. John Knappett at Knappett Projects, you have projects all over Vancouver Island, and things were moving right along, and cranes were in the air, and your signs were up. Tell me about the adjustments you had to make going into the pandemic with your work sites and your projects.
In March 15th, a Sunday, in 2020, we decided to shut down all our sites, which we did for 1 to 2 weeks while we got a handle on what was going on. And we instituted all the COVID safety measures that were recommended. We put in hand wash stations with hot water. We instituted social distancing and basically rearranged our sites and then started up again. Since then, we've managed to carry on pretty much, I would say, not normal, but and certainly with less productivity. I think the industry as a whole and the world as a whole has less productivity, but we've managed to carry on. So the industry and our firm have been very fortunate compared to other industries and other unfortunate people in that we've earned a living through all of this. And we're very pleased by that.
So Kathy, in the development world, when the people who are building neighborhoods, projects, buildings, whatever it might be, when this came along into their world, what sort of pivots and changes did that community in that sector have to make?
um, in development.
Yeah.
So we helped or tried to help the municipalities figure out how they were going to move to an online process with their community engagement and public hearings and so on. That was really important for the development industry, that the applications were still able to move down and carry on.
Yeah, so that you advocate for that sort of thing and you help them do
Absolutely.
exactly what has to happen. Okay, so along we went and projects continued. The signs were up. There's a couple of things we want to talk about next. One is workforce and workers. I think most of us know that there was a shortage of workers pre-COVID, during COVID, and it's going to be that way after as well. The other thing, though, that's come along to sort of upset the plan is the supply chain, the materials used in building. We're going to talk about that next. And the cost of the supplies in the chain right now, Tom Plumb from Kinetic Construction, you explained it a couple of minutes ago before we actually started recording about building a deck. Tell me that analogy about building a deck and the cost of it now compared to a year ago.
Well, I didn't do the takeoff, but the comparison was a 12 by 12 residential wood deck, simple deck, wood slats, not vinyl, nothing weird like that.
Okay.
So just the deck itself, March 2020 would have been $950 in materials, and the same deck today is well over $3,000 for the same material package for the deck. So if that puts it in perspective, I'm Scottish, so I put it in perspective for me that a single 1 foot length of 2 by 6, which is often firewood on a site, is actually worth $1.50. So that to me, it's like, you never relate that scrap end of 2 by 6 with an actual cost, but that's $1.50. So to me, that's relative to me.
Oh, yeah. Well, in cost management, that's a big deal. So John Knappett Projects, the cost of lumber, depends on who you talk to, has gone up about 200% in the last year. What is going on?
We'll talk about lumber, but it's throughout the construction supply chain.
Sure.
There's big changes and big cost increases. Lumber is a North American and worldwide commodity. The North American, really what we deal with is the North American supply chain, and our prices are hooked to the US market. We may make a lot of lumber in British Columbia, but the price is determined south of the border. And the US market has been booming, and there's very little elasticity of supply. So there isn't the ability to crank up the mills and harvest more trees anymore the way there was 5, 10, 20 years ago. And the other factor that people don't quite understand is the engineered lumber supply. So engineered lumber is the stuff that's like tech lambs that are made in a plant out of pieces of lumber and glued together, and that's the stuff you see on your joists. There's a real shortage of that, and it's not just price, because the prices have skyrocketed. As you say, it's supply. Some of these things you just can't get, and that's due to mill shutdowns and COVID closures and lack of supply, lack of elasticity.
So the principle of supply and demand comes into play, that if there's more demand than there is supply, you charge more for it. And that's just the full up cost. That's what happens. Yeah,
and if you're an engineered supply plant in Washington State, you ship to California before you ship to British Columbia. So
right. Saw a stat that said that since the pandemic has started, 37% of homeowners have undertaken some sort of renovation around their house. So that, of course, puts more demand on the supply, too. On the development side, Kathy Whitcher from UDI, has there been sort of a change in the nature of the work that developers are undertaking right now? In other words, did they sort of have a plan but have pivoted that plan or altered it somewhat throughout the pandemic?
Well, I mean, any project it's a moving target, especially with the prices going up. I don't think, honestly, I don't think there's been a change in what people are building. It's trying to get through the process with the municipalities as quickly as possible. We're in a housing crisis. Mm-hmm. We have 1.1 month supply of single family housing. we have 1.4 months of condo and 0.6 of a month of townhouses. And that's how the real estate industry measures our supply of what we've got in the market. It's incredibly low. So really, the developers are just trying to crank out whatever they can as quickly as they can. So yeah, I don't think it's really changed.
Yeah. When we take a look at, I guess, the nature of products or what they're going to be, and Tom Plumb, I'll come to you with this one. Has there been a change in the demand of the type of building or project as people are now asking you to bid on something a year or 2 or 3 down the road? Is any of that changed?
Well, they're innately more expensive to build.
Right.
They're more complicated. They're more energy efficient. All this stuff comes with supposedly a cost. But so what we're being asked to build is more expensive by design. See, I think what's really happening here is we've got compounding issues that we don't know how to predict and we don't know how to solve. Right? Like for example, for a simple example is we arrest a Chinese businesswoman at the airport and it affects exports from our country to there. Like, I mean, everything is global now that affects everything together. Like, and then 2 years ago, I went out and bought the predictor model WTF 4.0, and it doesn't work anymore. There's nobody's crystal ball that actually works. We don't know that. I think some of the issues are so complex on a global level that we actually don't know what the problem is, and we can't figure out what the solution is going to be.
Yeah. John Knappett Projects, I think it was you that said in another meeting that we were involved with that, when you're acquiring the products you need to do a project, the wood, the beams, the steel, the concrete, whatever it might be, you're given a price on that and you move forward with that project based on that quote. How much of a price guarantee are you getting now when it comes to materials, especially wood? And Tom's laughing out loud. But yeah, how far out can you actually reserve that price?
Yeah, that's become really a different world from what it was even a year ago. We're getting basically 7-day notices that suppliers will hold the prices for 7 days, and this is throughout the trades. It's not just the bricks and mortar. It's the electricians, the mechanical people. Nobody's willing to predict or hold prices. So owners want, of course, a building built at a certain price, and some of the trades don't kick in for a year down the road. We have to put up the structure before the electrician starts. Right. So it's become a real problem of providing fixed prices because of the rapid escalation of all the commodities.
And what was that timeline before this time? What was it a year ago?
Well, we've undergone a period, and we've been through this before, but we've undergone a period of the last 20 years of very stable pricing, and certainly up until a year or two ago, you could predict the price a couple of years out. Right. You would bid a fixed price, and the suppliers would quote you concrete that's good for a year or 2 years. So that's been a big change. And just recently, I mean, this change has come over us mostly in the last few months, and it's like building a Ford truck. You can't build the whole truck unless you have that little microchip, right. And you can't sell the truck. Right?
That moves it all along. Yeah. Kathy, I'm going to ask you this about the development side. Have you heard of any projects? Don't have to name them, that have been either deferred, downsized, or totally canceled because of this supply problem?
Yes.
Okay. Good answer, right to the point. Is it more than in any other economy or some other time in our economic history? Would this have been happening 2 years ago at that same rate?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Prices are changing so rapidly that numbers a month ago were working and now they're not.
Yeah.
So yeah, it does. It definitely is affecting projects.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Bruce, we're becoming very concerned about future projects because they're, every project is budget constrained. There's not unlimited amounts of money, and we're seeing projects being deferred, and it's becoming quite concerning.
Yeah. Would it be, Tom, I'll direct this one to you. Do you see that maybe things that would be government projects might go forward, whereas it's private projects that might be a bit more compromised in the next little while?
Well, you really want to nail me, don't you?
Giving you a chance to show what you know, man.
Right. No. Well, there's only one buyer of construction services that seems to have the capacity to pay for ever escalating costs, and that's the taxpayer.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So yeah, I think that government is, no matter what the cost, they are determined to kick the economy back up by creating work projects, and they are like the amount of work that's coming for BC is absolutely out unbelievable. Like, and it's like we look at the volume that's coming, and we're looking at what we can handle right now, and I'm not sure where this is going to go. Like, there's 30 long-term care projects around the BC. I think the total budget is something like $3 billion or something. That's a reality. That's coming. That's a part of the plan. I have no idea like where we're going to get the material. And I don't know if John was alluding to it. It's the price is almost secondary right now. It's, can you get it?
Can you get the materials? Yeah.
Can you get the materials? We had somebody that we know over Vancouver who were ready to start their project. And they went around to, sure, they're a bit late on the draw here, but they went around to secure their lumber package, and the price was not even part of the discussion. No, we don't have it for you.
Wow.
All of the stuff that we've got allocated to us has been set for someone else.
Something we're going to talk about in another chamber chat one day is how these building costs will affect affordable housing. But we want to talk about next very briefly to wrap this up, and that is the labor force that's needed to actually do this work. So labor force, of course, before the pandemic came along, was an issue in most sectors right now, and trying to source people that will be the ones to take on this construction work going forward. Kathy, what are developers saying about sourcing the employees they need to do the work they want to do?
It's tough. It's tough right now. And of course, COVID's thrown another wrench in it that, it's harder for people to move around from province to province. So, it's always been, I think, both Tom and John could probably talk to this more, but it's been a give and take between Alberta and BC. They kind of go back and forth. But yeah, it's a huge challenge, definitely.
Yeah, in pretty plain terms, John Knappett, you are a guy who's always hiring. You're always looking for people. What are you looking for? Let's just be really specific. What are these jobs that are needed and available right now?
Well, construction, despite what people think, construction is a highly skilled business. Mm-hmm. People think of construction as a guy leaning on a shovel at the intersection, but there's no trades that don't involve a lot of skill. There's apprentices, there's laborers, there's helpers, but it's the skilled people that we're losing at the top end through retirement. And training for that peak of baby boomers that are retiring is very difficult. So we're short of skilled people, and I think throughout the trades, you can't find an employer who isn't hiring. We're all hiring, and it's a problem. It limits what we can take on. We're turning down. I'm sure Tom is as well. We're turning down projects all the time because you can't take on a project without the skilled people to do it. Fundamentally, we're a people business, and there's not a lot of. There are workarounds. We employ more efficient systems. We look for products that require less labor. All those things. But at the heart of construction, it's you see a building under construction, you see 100 people employed. And that's what we're struggling with, and the whole world is.
Yeah. So, Tom, when you take a look at acquiring those workers who are going to go to work for Kinetic or any other company, if they're going to be local, they have to already be trained, or they need to undergo training through a post-secondary. that probably needs another look, right, to make sure that the graduates are aligning with what the needs are within the community. How much has immigration been a factor in creating workforce in the past? Because that's been a backbone of lots of parts of the economy.
It hasn't been as effective as I would have hoped. I still think that's part of the answer, but we seem to be on a different, reading from different books. The industry and government seem to be just operating on different books about what their program is and what our program should be. I mean, yeah, we're looking for skilled people for sure, but actually we're actually looking for bright people who want to work, who we can train to do some work.
Right.
And so our requirements are sometimes down to, do you have a resting heartbeat over 55 and what's your OSAT level? if you pass those, we can probably figure out and train you how to work, right? So
yeah, you're hired.
It's just all around there's issues. I really think that there's a potential for some immigration or even temporary to solve the problem. I know that Europe could supply, it has a system to supply carpenters, for example. And a European trained carpenter probably is more like a doctor over here. Like they take their trades training really seriously.
Well, they're craftspeople, really, aren't they?
Yeah. So I mean, it's sure that some of them want to build pianos all the time, but so that what I think we have to do is we have to make those systems easier to accomplish, right? And now they're just so complicated. Like just to get somebody out of another country is like $5,000 and 8 months, and it's just. Yet we see examples of immigration happening much quicker than that, but nothing directed at what we need.
Thank you all for your time and your insight into this. John Knappett is the president of Knappett Projects, and Tom Plumb is the CEO of Kinetic Construction. They are both chamber champions with the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce, and Kathy Whitcher is the executive director of the Urban Development Institute for the Capital Region. Thank you all for being with us today and for being Chamber of Commerce members too. And that's it for this Chamber Chat. Thanks once again to our friends at Czech Television for hosting us here in the podcasting studio. I'm Bruce Williams. I will see you again for another Chamber Chat.